YouTube, what's going on? Andrew Darling here. I guess I'm still Mr. Darling 4. That's still my Twitter and my Instagram. And Facebook, technically. But, February. Bar exam. Round 2 for me. It's over. So I only had to take the Florida section. I did not have to take the MBE section. I went down to Tampa a few days early. A couple days early. I went down on a Sunday. Locked myself in a hotel room for 2 days. Just to sort of do one last mass cramming exercise. Wrote a bunch of notes, which I put up on the wall on these big old post-it note sticky pads. Let me see if I have a picture of that. This is what my hotel looked like while I was in there preparing for the bar exam. There were 3 things I really didn't want to see on the essays. I didn't want to see trusts. I just hadn't spent a lot of time with them. I didn't take that class in law school. I didn't really want to see secure transactions. I don't think anybody ever wants to see secure transactions on there. And commercial paper. I studied commercial paper really early on in the process this time. And saw it again a couple times. But wasn't too worried about it going in. I felt like I knew enough about commercial paper. Secure transactions is really a whole lot of rules. I just didn't feel like I knew a bunch of the rules. And trust I just wasn't as familiar with as I probably should have been. And day 1, which was the only day I did, which was the state day, the Florida day, I went in the morning. We get our test instructions. We get situated. We get signed into our laptops. Those of us that paid to use our own laptops. And then they're like, all right, you may begin. I open it up. The very first essay is a trust essay. I was like, all right, well, let me skim through this one because I read all the essays at the beginning. You figure out which one's going to be your best, and you write that one first so you get yourself a little bit of confidence. I turned the page, the second essay, secure transactions. There's a little piece in there about commercial paper, and then there's a professional responsibility part. I'm like, crap. And I was just smiling. I was smiling in the exam because I knew this is exactly what it had to be. And then the third essay was a negligence one and some PR involved in that. And so I started on negligence because, that's sort of what most people are familiar with. And I started on that, and I feel like I did a really thorough job on that essay. I went back to the trust essay, and here's what bailed me out. I was smart enough to know what I didn't know. And I knew that before the exam. So the morning of the exam, Tuesday morning, I was going over my trust outline and my trust sort of cheat sheet again, just to be comfortable, just to make sure I knew what I was doing. And I remembered 2 or 3 of the acronyms that I needed to remember. I remembered what it actually stood for. Like, I remember what the requirements of a trust were in Florida. I remember some of the stuff that trustees have as far as like their fiduciary duties, their duties against self-dealing. I remembered all those things. I was able to write all the definitions of them. I was able to analyze all of them. And I don't know, like I feel like I did a competent job. So then I got to the secure transaction essay. I had about 48-ish minutes left, which is about right for, you're supposed to take an hour on each of them. But I spent a little bit of time at the beginning reading all 3. And then I spent a little bit more time on the negligence and the trusts, the ones that I felt like I knew better. I felt like 48 minutes was plenty of time to get everything, not to do a great essay, but it was to get everything that I knew about secure transactions and the little blurb about commercial paper and the PR part of it. I went and did the PR part first, the professional responsibility. I was much more familiar with that. That's a subject that I did well in the class. I did pretty well in the MPRE, and I was just more comfortable with that. So I went and I did that part first to make sure I didn't miss any points. And then I went through and put down a whole bunch of definitions, a whole bunch of rule statements, analyzed a few of them. I didn't get to all the analysis. I wanted to make sure I got as many points as I could for the rules themselves. And then the essay parts were over. So use the full 3 hours as you're supposed to. Then I went and sat down in it was the joint University of Florida, University of Miami schools of law. I don't know if Florida's the College of Law. I think it's still a school of law. But either way, we had a sort of a joint room, which is the same thing we had back in the summer. And we had our lunch, they had their lunch, and we sat there a little bit more. I took a little bit of time to review some of the potential multiple choice questions that were going to happen in the afternoon. In the afternoon, the multiple choice question, it's always civil and criminal procedure. That's always there. And then there's 2 of 3 of the next subjects, and that's either evidence, business entities, or wills and estates. And there's always 2 out of those 3. So in the summertime, it was business entities, evidence, criminal procedure, and civil procedure. And then this time, which I think is actually going to be beneficial to me, was criminal civil procedure, of course, and then business entities and wills and trusts. So there were only maybe 2 questions, maybe 3 questions, that I read the question, read all the answers, and I was just like, oh no. Which is a lot better than it was for me during the summer. So during the summer, I was a 1.5-ish below average on the civil and criminal procedure. I was right the point above, so the average I think was 18.4, and I had 19 on business entities. And then for evidence, the average was 18, and I had 14. So I was below average on those, as well as the essays. I was below average on 2 of the 3 essays, and one of the essays I was like 8 or 9 points above average. That was the federal con law one, so shout out to Professor Corbin down at the University of Miami School of Law, and Professor Fenton. They beat con law into me well enough in con law 1 and 2 that I was able to answer those questions. But on this exam, like I said, we had civil and criminal procedure, business entities, and wills and estates. All of which are subjects that I'm comfortable with. I spent quite a bit of time with all of these subjects from January through February. And I feel like I did well. Like I said, there's only 2, 3, 4 at the most questions where I was just like, I have no idea. And then all of the rest of them, there were questions that I knew what rule they were testing for. There were some of them that I got down to 1 or 2 answers and, you know, maybe didn't remember the specific rule, but I feel like most of them I got down to a 50-50 shot. But a lot of them, I just knew the answer. And that felt really good. Now, whether it's the right answer or not, that's a whole other thing to figure out here in April when these results get released. So I'll find out in April what I did or didn't do well on the bar exam. So in July, and I know I said this in the video when I was actually taking the bar exam, sort of how I experienced it, and I followed it up. And I sort of said that, you know, I felt good about the July exam. And, you know, I got the results back, and you averaged the 2 sections, and I failed by a point overall. So I felt pretty decent about that. But the more I was able to go back and look at the scores and sort of understand what I didn't know going into it. The essay I thought I did the best on back in July was delinquency. I was 10 or 12 points below average on that. So I had to understand what was it that I thought I knew, that I didn't know, that allowed me to score so poorly. And I feel like I learned the things I needed to learn. I feel like I understood the strategies better after simply just having the experience of taking the exam once. You can do practice exams all day. You can write essays. You can outline essays. You can do multiple choice questions. But honestly, until you take the exam, like, you really just don't know. And there was a lot of that for me that was an advantage coming into the second exam. Because even though I had no idea what the topics were going to be on the essays out of the 13 or 14 topics that it can be, I knew that I'd been through this process before and that it wasn't as bad as we always make it out to be. It wasn't good, it wasn't fun, it wasn't easy, but it's never as bad as you sort of make it out to be in your mind. So I was able to go through that process and know that regardless what the essay topics were going to be, I was going to get through it. And then when you get to the afternoon, it was just Florida topics. It was just 100 multiple choice questions on basically 1 of 5 things, or 3 of 5 things, 4 or 5 things, and that was it. So I got through it. Like I said, I feel, I don't want to say better or worse than I did in July. I feel like I was more prepared for the multiple choice section, and I feel like these essays I was able to answer more completely. Not the secure transaction one. I'm going to be a few points below average on that. I know that. I would be surprised if I was less than 10 points below average on that. But I feel like the negligence one and the trust essay, I feel like I'm above average on. I'm saying that now so I can go back and look and be like, man, I was stupid. Or, yeah, I had a good feeling. But it wasn't a horrible experience. The Florida bar, I mean, they make this as seamless and as painless as they can. I mean, aside from the fees for everything. But I get it. You know, it's not free to put on these exams. The Tampa Convention Center, to my understanding, isn't necessarily donating their space. Maybe they are. If they are, I want my laptop fee money back, but I don't think that's going to happen. But no, it wasn't a bad experience at all. I went through, and the mentality that I have, and I wrote about this before I even took the exam, I'm going to keep taking the exam until I pass it, regardless of what I'm doing in life. And as you guys know, I worked on a political campaign while I waited and while the results came out last time and after the results came out. And it seems pretty likely that that's something I'll probably get into more regularly, depending on what these results say, depending on if the results come out before I get a job working for any of the potential presidential candidates. So for me, this is just sort of a brain dump, a end of the day. How do I feel? I feel good. I feel like I knew what I needed to know. I feel really good about the multiple choice. I feel above average on 2 out of 3 essays. So I just got to get to that 136. I don't get the benefit of averaging the 2 sections. So in Florida, you have to get a 136 on each sections or average 136 for the same exam. That's where I failed in July. I only had a 131 in Florida and I had a 139 in the MBE, which averages 135, which puts me short of that 136 average. So I decided only to take the Florida section because I felt like I could spend more time and focus and effort on that. I know this is sort of towards the end of the video, but I want to point this out too. If you pass one section and you have the opportunity to only take a single section, especially in Florida, it's a lot harder to study for one section than you think it is initially. So going into it, when you study for the entire exam, you go into Barbary, you go into Themis, whatever your preferred study method is, and you go through, and each day you have a list of things to go through. The very first day is like your 100 MBE question baseline test, and then you just keep working your way through, and every day you have lectures, you have questions, you have essay reviews, graded essays. Like you go through and you have all these things to do every day. When you take one section, you lose that everyday guidance. You don't get to just go do that stuff. You have to pick what you do that day and how you work through it. And when you're just doing Florida, like you don't really remember exactly what parts of contracts and real property and crim law apply to Florida because you're looking at distinctions. So a lot of times I feel like in the event that I do fail again, I'm going back to taking the full exam. And the reason I say that is I feel strong enough about the MBE that I can put the work in the MBE side of it, and that work is going to translate to more points on the MBE side, which will pull up any sort of weakness in Florida. Well, I don't think I failed. I didn't think I failed before, but maybe that's just a mentality that I have, which could hurt me, I guess, if I am failing. But I don't know, man. I'm going to stop talking because I've been talking for a little minute here. But, man, I appreciate it. This is sort of just my ramblings. I feel good. I feel confident. I feel like I did everything I needed to do to be successful. I didn't walk out of there with the feeling that I wanted to feel, which was, hell yeah, I know I passed. I didn't walk out of there with that, but I don't know if anybody ever actually walks out of there with that. I do know that I am much more confident about the multiple choice answers. I feel like I was able to make up some points there, where maybe I missed a couple points in the summer. And on the essays, I feel really good about 2 of them. I feel like I got what I needed to get out of the secure transaction / commercial paper / PR one. But the trust one and the negligence one, where it had a little bit of PR in it too, I feel fine about those. I feel like I did what I needed to do. And I guess we'll see here in the next couple months. But until then, I don't know how much time I'm going to spend on this channel doing anything. I'll be out looking for a job, depending on what it is. I am fortunate enough to be able to sort of be a little picky, even though my wife won't agree to that. But I'm going to find a job that I want to do. And when I pass this bar exam, that's going to open up a bunch of other opportunities for me. I have friends that have already I don't want to say offered me a job, but pretty much said that there are positions that I can take in the different fields that I want, criminal defense work, or something in the labor and employment law area, more towards the employment, not the labor part. But either way, we'll see what happens. We'll talk to you guys soon. I appreciate all your support. Bar exam, round 2. It's over. Take care. We'll talk to you soon and see you in the next one.